Well, hello everybody. I was not able to make it to Porto, but I hope you have an excellent workshop together. And what I would like to do in this presentation is to give you a global perspective on integrated multitrophic aquaculture. And what is very important is the fact that IMTA is a concept and not a formula. So in September '95, just before the year 2000, we had a conference in St. Andrews in New Brunswick, Canada. That was at the time, just a few years before 2000. What will happen to computers? Well, what will happen to aquaculture? And that was the theme of that conference. I made a presentation there. I call it mixed, integrated, poly or multi-level aquaculture. Whatever you call it, it's time to put seaweeds around your cages. And I would say from '95 to 2000, it was a period of preaching in the desert. And for sure, we wanted to differentiate our practice from monoculture, but we didn't know exactly how to call it. Obviously, when you talk about monoculture, the other terms that come in mind is polyculture, but that's not what we are doing, because polyculture could be, for example, like here, the cultivation of 3 species of fish together, but that's not what we are doing, because 3 species of fish together, especially if it is a co-cultivation of 3 fed species together, we are not addressing a number of problems. So in March 2004, we had a workshop in St. John, New Brunswick, here in Canada. And at that time, I was talking about integrated aquaculture, and Jack Taylor was talking about multitrophic aquaculture. So of course, we combined the two, and that's how integrated multitrophic aquaculture, or IMTA, started in 2004. And I am very glad that since then, so in 14 years, approximately 1,300 publications on IMTA have been published so far. So that's quite a level of production and a level of interest. But in fact, the practice is much older. If we go back to 2200, 2100 BC, so it's almost 4,000 years, there is already a document in China, the Yu Yu Bin, that talk about integrating fish with aquatic plants and vegetable production. So as a matter of fact, IMTA started in freshwater. If we go to 2000 year BC in Egypt, so we can see early representation of Nile tilapia growing in integrated agriculture and aquaculture system, the draining ponds, with floating plants and fruit trees. And that's a hieroglyph on the tomb of Thebain in Egypt. More recently, around 1,500 years ago, there is also in Hawaii the Hauiupua integrated agriculture, aquaculture, freshwater, from freshwater to marine farming system, all the way this Hawaiian valley. And that stopped around 1848 when land was for sale in Hawaii to especially non-indigenous people. But even more recently in Europe, so we have to go 400 years ago, in the Chateau of Fontainebleau in France, there is also an example of freshwater IMTA. At that time, the king was Henri IV, and he was tired of sending all the food to Fontainebleau, and it's just 65 kilometers, which at the present time is nothing. But in these days, you had the time to be robbed 3 times between Paris and Fontainebleau. The food was never arriving, so he said, enough is enough. Fontainebleau, to survive, has to be self-sustainable, self-sufficient, so we will do aquaculture there. And as a matter of fact, this étang aux carpes, the carp ponds, is still there when you visit the castle. And here, as a matter of fact, it was Henri IV's little labs that was right there. So freshwater IMTA, also royal freshwater IMTA. So really what we have been doing in Canada is developing over the last 18 years approximately one version of IMTA, I would say, à la Canadienne, so on the East Coast and also on the West Coast. So what is integrated multitrophic aquaculture, or IMTA? At the beginning we thought it was 3 components: the fed aquaculture, the fish, to extractive aquaculture, suspension extractive aquaculture, the shellfish and the seaweeds. So how does it work? When you feed your fish, you create a nutrient zone, and you have different types of nutrients. So the small particulate organic matter, that doesn't go very far, so that's why you need to put your shellfish very close to the fish cages. Then you have the dissolved inorganic nutrient, like dissolved nitrogen, dissolved phosphorus, dissolved carbon, that travel much farther. So that's why you don't need to put your seaweed as close to the fish. So at the beginning, that was this system. And then we realized that the shellfish are very good at filtering small particulate organic matter, but they will reject the larger particulate organic matter. So we need other organisms, because the large particulate organic matter fall faster to the bottom, and we need other invertebrates for that. So, and also the shellfish are not neutral in the system. They also release feces and pseudofeces. So here at the bottom, we need the fourth component, the deposit extractive aquaculture with invertebrates such as sea urchins, sea cucumbers, sea worms, lobsters, and that will be the fourth component. Then also there is a fifth component, and as a matter of fact, in marine biology we don't know much about it. It's all what is the role of microbes and bacteria. So I call it the mineralizing aquaculture component at the bottom, and all this activity at the bottom, bioturbations, that will release some more dissolved inorganic nutrients that will be available to the seaweed. So if you want, that is the overall schematic for integrated multitrophic aquaculture. Doesn't mean that any IMTA farm, IMTA system has to have the 5 components. It can be combination of the 5, but what is important is having multitrophic level at works. So it should be very clear, IMTA was never conceived with the idea of being viewed only as a cultivation of salmon, kelps, blue mussel, and a few other invertebrates in temperate waters and only within the limits of existing finfish aquaculture site. That's what we have to do in Canada to start to work on that. So we started like that, and you can see here salmon, mussels, and seaweeds. But we did that because we wanted to conduct experiments at sea within the limitation of the regulation that are presently in place. Rather than extrapolating from small tank experiments in the lab, it's always easy to do experiment in a lab within 100 liters of water, and you say, oh, everything is wonderful, then you multiply, and sometimes you have surprise, because it doesn't necessarily reflect what is really occurring in the environment. So we wanted to do it at sea, but we had to work within the regulation, so it means we had to do it within the limit of salmon site. But that's not my ultimate design of IMTA. And also, this is only one of the variations on the central overarching IMTA theme, but there are many variations. So I like to say IMTA is not like the music of Frédéric Chopin, but the music, as a matter of fact, of Johann Sebastian Bach. He was very good at theme and variation, so you have one theme, ta 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 ta. And then we built many variations. And we continue on. Many variations on one theme. And that's what is IMTA. So to give you a few ideas of this variation, a little list of acronyms. Integrated agriculture, aquaculture, that's a type of IMTA. Integrated fisheries aquaculture. Integrated silviculture, for example, with mangrove and shrimps aquaculture, integrated green water aquaculture, integrated biofloc aquaculture, integrated temporal aquaculture, integrated sequential aquaculture, also called partition aquaculture or fractionated aquaculture, sustainable or sustained ecological aquaculture, because the acronym is C. Freshwater IMTA or FIMTA, but it's also what people call aquaponics. Integrated peri-urban aquaculture, doing aquaculture within the city. Now, for example, Chinese colleagues talk about integrated ocean ranching, but it's a type of IMTA. And also, what will be good is also to think about combining food and renewable energy park, wind farms, and aquaculture together. So here is a bunch of acronyms. So to give you an idea, I will show you a few pictures. Here it's integrated agriculture, aquaculture in Vietnam. So rice and fish combined. Here it's integrated green water aquaculture in India. Here it's biofloc aquaculture. FIMTA, freshwater IMTA or aquaponics in the Virgin Islands, the system of Dr. Rakoczy. And also we have been for the last few years doing freshwater IMTA also here at the University of New Brunswick as part of the Canadian IMTA network. There is also very large-scale IMTA. So here we are in Changgubei in China, little north of you go. Everybody arrive in China, in Beijing, and then you go to Changgubei, and everybody has its eureka moment when they see that large-scale operation. To give you an idea, all that is 10 nautical miles, so it's 18 kilometers. So it's huge, and you can see it from satellite Google Earth. So yes, it's just north of Qingdao, and you have Changgubei. But when you see it from the water level, that's how it looks. The scale of it is amazing. Mostly what it is, it's seaweed, 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 shellfish, 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 shellfish. As a matter of fact, very few fish cages. And in fact, this year, the government asked all the fish cages to be removed from Changgubei. The reason why is not very clear. Not all the scientists agree with that, but that's what has happened. So mostly now, Changgubei is seaweed and invertebrates. But as a matter of fact, if you want to understand Changgubei, you cannot explain it by only what is happening in the bay. You have to also see the drainage systems that go in the bay. So agricultural runoffs. So here, for example, all these dark spots at the seaweed, but you have tremendous agricultural runoff. You have also land-based aquaculture here. That's also a source of nutrients, and that's how we have to understand. Not only in the bay, but all the drainage system all around, and then you can do some nutrient budgets. So here we are back to the Bay of Fundy in New Brunswick, Canada, a much smaller scale. Here is an example of one of the sites, salmon sites, that we have to modify into an IMTA site. So we start with the salmon cages, and then we add some mussel rafts, and then some seaweed raft. And why is that site designed? It's because here, mostly 80% of the time, the current is that way. But you will be in a different spot with a different hydrodynamic system. You will design the farm differently. So and here we are, what we get, salmon, mussels, and also kelp. And here we have a chef, not very far from here, that do some wonderful salmon tartare wrapped into kelp. It's delicious. Over the last 2 years, I have been working with Magellan Aqua Farm, Steve Bachman, who produce sea scallops, and my company, Chopin Coastal Health Solution, we are producing seaweeds. And of course, in your dish, when you combine scallop and seaweeds with a wonderful white wine from France, everything is wonderful and delicious. So really, if we look at the system, what is happening? We have Western world groups that have been working on IMTA over the last 2 decades, a little more than 2 decades, developing small-scale, pre-commercial IMTA operation by modifying fish sites to co-cultivate invertebrates and seaweed. So that's what I call fish IMTA. Fish in the 70s and 80s, addition of invertebrates and seaweeds in the 2000s. We have to recognize that commercial scaling up has not been easy. I would say the biological and environmental advantage of this practice have generally been accepted, but the barriers for adoption have been mostly economics and regulatory. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have what happened in Asian countries. They have a long tradition of using different IMTS systems. As I mentioned, it started in freshwater, so they have centuries of doing IMTA, and they have seen the benefits, the regulators have seen the benefits, the politicians have seen the benefits, and it's not being argued anymore. So the way they modify their site, as a matter of fact, has been the diametrical approach compared to the FIS. That's what I call the SIF. They started with seaweed sites in the 50s, and then in the 80s they added invertebrates, and in the 90s they added the fish, to then in 2019 remove the fish. And then the scale of it has nothing to do with what we are doing in the Western world. So, but are there apple versus oranges? Should we compare these different type of system? Is there anything to learn? I think so. We should work together, and maybe gradually we will move to a more integrated solution, and maybe one day we will arrive to that. You see with the IMTA sticker here, that will be a high level of integration. We have to be conscious what is happening in Asia is not necessarily transferable to what happened in the Western world, but we can learn in both directions. That's what is important. So a major rethinking is needed regarding the functioning of an aquaculture farm. Western IMTA has generally developed within the restrictive limit of existing fish sites. That's the way to start for us, which doesn't reflect the ecosystem scale at which aquaculture farms really function. Because we have different nutrients to recapture. We have the small particulate organic nutrients, the large particulate organic nutrients, the dissolved inorganic nutrients. So different nutrients to recapture mean different spatial and temporal strategy should be designed. It also means that the I, the integrated in IMTA, should be understood as cultivation in proximity, not considering absolute distances, but connectivity in terms of ecosystemic functionalities. So in proximity, I use that on purpose to avoid absolute numbers. I don't want to tell you that the species have to be within 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers, 200 meters from each other. That's very dangerous, because when you start to have distances, it's easy to put in the regulation, it's not easy to take them out. In Canada, for example, when we wanted to develop IMT at the beginning, there was a regulation that said, oh, you are not allowed to put one species closer to another by 250 meters. And they say, okay, oh yeah, little academics try, have fun with IMTA, but it will never be commercial. And then we say, well, if it will never be commercial, why would the industry be interested in it? So where does this 250 meter come from? And I was meeting after meeting asking that. Oh, well, we don't know exactly. So I said, well, I recalculate, and as a matter of fact, it's 158.3 meters. So I was going to every meeting, 158.3 meters. And they say, well, how did you arrive to 158.3 meters? I said, just like you with your 250. So we have to be very careful. It's easy to put magic numbers in regulation. It's not easy to take them out. So we have to be very careful with that. So we also have to understand that the different components of an IMTA system do not have to be right at the same location. But really what is important to consider is entire base, coastal area, region, and they could be the unit of IMTA management within what I call integrated coastal area management, or ICAM strategy. And of course, that will challenge the traditional aquaculture regulation of policies. And that's where some of the resistance is. The placement of the different components of an IMTA system on the scale at which it will be managed will certainly trigger change to regulation, because these regulations were rarely, if never, designed without IMTA in mind in most countries, because I had never heard of it before. So regulations governing aquaculture are often designed with a single species or a single group of species in mind, just like fisheries have been managed for so many years. And that inhibits generally a more holistic approach by not considering species interaction and also ecosystem-based management approach. And that's what IMTA is important. is to consider all these interactions. So we know that IMTS system should and will continue to evolve. It's not static. Because the IMTA concept is extremely flexible and can be applied worldwide to open water or land-based system, marine and freshwater system environment, on temperate and tropical climate, there is no ultimate IMTS system to fit the world. We have different climatic, environmental, biological, physical, chemical, economic, historical, societal, political, and governance conditions, and all that will lead to different choices in the design of the best suited IMTS system with your local organisms. And again, there is no ultimate IMTS system to fit the world, so it should be very clear that IMTA is a concept, but it's not a formula. It is not enough to consider multiple species, like in polyculture. They have to be multiple trophic levels based on their complementary function in the ecosystem. They should also have an economic value or potential if you want to have the industry interested in it. But again, it's a concept. I think it would be a mistake to try to have a reductionist approach and arrive to a very narrow definition of IMTA. As a matter of fact, I don't think it will be beneficial in the long-term development of IMTA. So we have to keep it broad, we have to keep it wide as a concept, not trying to narrow it down in a very reductionist manner into a little formula. And there is also nothing that says that only one company should be in charge of producing all the IMTA components. We started like that in Canada because we were working with one of the biggest producers of salmon in our region, but we realized it's not the way to go. So as a matter of fact, there may need to be several companies, and what will be a challenge is they will have to coordinate their activity within the integrated coastal area management region. Now also, if we want to give a true full value to IMTA, we also have to realize that seaweeds and other extractive species need to be valued for not only their biomass and food trading value, but also for the ecosystem services they provide, along with the increase in customer trust and societal political license to operate that they give to the aquaculture industry. And if you want, that here where we go into the circular economy approach that is also very important for IMTA. So mentality will have to change. Nutrients are not necessarily waste or a byproduct. We have two daughters, they both went to the same school, and one evening they both came back with, oh my God, I learned today nitrogen is bad. Nitrogen is bad, nitrogen is bad. I say, whoa, 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 what is going on? Nitrogen, you need nitrogen. If you didn't have nitrogen, you would not be alive. So we need nitrogen, but too much nitrogen can be a problem. So let's start talking about waste and byproduct, but as a matter of fact, we should consider them as co-product, which is typical of circular economy vocabulary, as a matter of fact. They are useful for the cultivation of other crops in more efficient and responsible food production system, while bioremediation of coastal eutrophication take place. So we will have to have the value of the ecosystem services provided by this extractive component of IMTS system. First, we will have to recognize they exist. Then we will have to give a monetary value to them. And if we can do that, then we should be able to use them as financial and regulatory incentive tools. And I will give you the example of the seaweed industry. For example, yes, the seaweeds, total production worldwide, 30.1 million tons, total US dollar value around $11.7 billion. If we look at, let's say, an average composition of seaweed, generally it's around 0.35% nitrogen, 0.04% phosphorus, around 3% of carbon. And if I look at how much it costs to remove these nutrients, for example, on a typical wastewater treatment facility, here is just taking off of Toronto Airport, so it's just outside of Toronto, a waste treatment facility. Depending on the technique for that nitrogen, it's between $10 and $30 per kilo. For nitrogen, for phosphorus, it's around $4 per kilo. For carbon, it's, let's say, around $25 per ton. Be very careful, here it's per ton, here it's per kilo. So there is a factor 1,000, and I will come back to that. So if I calculate the ecosystem services provided by seaweeds worldwide, free of charge for nature and for humans, it's at least $1.1 billion to $3.2 billion. And if I compare it to the total value, it's at least 27.6% of the present commercial value. But nobody put a price on that. Nobody recognized it in business cases, in business sheets, in developments and everything. So it's never factored in, but they should, because they do that at the present time, I would say free of charge, but for how long? So it's about time we talk about developing a system of nutrient trading credits. Just like carbon trading credit, well, in the coastal environment, I think the issue is much more nutrient trading credit globally than just carbon. And as a matter of fact, one thing that is very interesting, there is more money to be made with nutrient trading credits than with carbon trading credits. If I calculate nitrogen trading credits, they are between $1.1 billion and 3.2. For phosphorus, it's much less, 48. And for carbon, it's only 22 million, not million and billion, and that is due to the per ton versus per kilo that was in the previous slide. So as a matter of fact, there is a factor 1,000. Nobody talk about that. Everybody get excited about carbon tax, carbon credit. We should be excited about nitrogen and phosphorus trading credits. So there is no renewed interest in the mariculture of seaweed for their integrated cultivation, the ecosystem service they provide, and also novel uses. So we have just seen seaweed are excellent nutrient scrubbers, especially for dissolved nitrogen, phosphorus, and carbon. With IMTAs, then seaweed can be cultivated without fertilizer, without agrochemicals. But we should be very clear. IMTA is much more than a story of nutrients. It provides other ecosystem services. So seaweeds do not need, it may be so simple to say, but seaweeds don't need to be irrigated. They are in the water already, so I don't have to irrigate that crop. Seaweed cultivation does not need more arable soil or land transformation, so deforestation. Seaweed can be used for habitat restoration. Also, seaweed in an aquaculture system is the only component that provides oxygen, while all the other animals and microbial components consume oxygen. Seaweed sequester carbon dioxide, so they can be involved in slowing down global warming. And by sequestering this carbon dioxide, they could also reduce coastal acidification. Be very careful, I say coastal acidification on purpose. I didn't say ocean acidification. I have to be realistic. I will never grow in my life enough seaweeds to change the pH of a whole oceans. But at the coastal level, in a coastal region, I could have an impact with some seaweed cultivation, locally changing the pH. And that's the only chemical equation I will show you, but CO2 plus water plus carbonate, at the present time we are shifting the equilibrium towards here, bicarbonates, and these bicarbonates are not bioavailable to shellfish or coral reefs to calcify, and that's the problem we see. We have this bleaching or the shellfish not growing. If you reduce your CO2, in good old chemistry, as a matter of fact, we should reverse the equilibrium to go more towards, again, the production of carbonates, which are bioavailable to shellfish or coral reef, for example. Also, IMTA multi-crop diversification approach, growing fish, seaweeds, and invertebrates could be an economic risk mitigation and management option to address pending climate change on coastal acidification impact. That is the good old adage. You know, you said don't put all your, I will modify it a little, don't put all your salmon eggs in the same basket. Well, that's We know it where if you play on the stock exchange, you know it in agriculture, you need more than one crop, because one year it's too dry, one year it's too wet, so you diversify. It should be the same with aquaculture. We need to diversify this as a risk mitigation option. We have also tried seaweed as partial fish protein substitution in aquaculture field. Here it's with juvenile salmon, and we have fed them with seaweed, and they were able to digest that. We can talk about biochar, methane, bioethanol, biofuel, biodiesel, but that will be another presentation. And as a matter of fact, I am not too convinced that's the best use of seaweed. The numbers don't add up. I will have to produce a lot of seaweed, and I will have to produce them very cheap to compete with the fossil biofuel, petroleum, and I cannot produce seaweed at 40 cents a ton. That's not what I am interested in. I want to produce seaweed for several dollars a kilo, from a few tens or less to maybe 100 or some more per kilo, not 40 cents per ton. We also could have seaweed cultivation or IMTA system associated with energy park, like for example wind farm. And the whole idea is, as a matter of fact, to combine this activity to reduce the cumulative footprint by adding these two activities together. On top of that, if you use that, then it's circular, and as a matter of fact, it will always be downstream for the nutrients. So we should be very clear that all that takes time to develop and implement. Science and society need time to think and evolve. And we should realize that we are still in the infancy of Western IMTA. And by the way, we have been improving aquaculture for centuries, and still agriculture is not perfect. So do we think that in a few decades aquaculture will be perfect? No. So the adoption of IMTA will not happen overnight, especially in the Western world, which presently still prefers monoculture, linear processes, and short-term profit. We will need patience, determination, and persistence to get people to see the environmental, economic, and societal advantage of growing complementary species together by creating circular economy processes and seeking sustainability in the long term. So if some people are against fast food, I am against fast science. It will take time. Now, just for comparison, let's see what happened with the car industry. The first battery electrical car that was by Toyota, a Prius, it was developed in '93, first sales in '97. The first hydrogen fuel cell car, again by Toyota, the Mirai, starting the development in '92, and the first sale was in 2014. So it took some time. And as a matter of fact, they are still not the predominant vehicle on the road. And that's because there is no real incentive to favor their sale. And also there are still some logistical issues with refueling stations and things that are not so much available. So Toyota is very clear. They say the new horizon for Toyota is 2050. They know it will take time before this type of car are adopted. So what will it be for IMTA? I don't know, but a decade is not that much, okay? And it should be very clear, because when we get a grant or we get a project for 4 years, okay? What do we do in 4 years? The first year you get your partner together. The second year you realize, oops, not all the partners are measuring with apple, and some with apple, some with oranges, so we cannot compare all these things. Maybe everybody should use bananas, then we will be able to compare. The third year, then you become productive. So the third year, yes, maybe you acquire some data, and in the fourth year you have to write a report. So in 4-year grant, in a 4-year project, what have you done for the development of IMTA? Very little. So as a matter of fact, we should put that in perspective. And if after 4 years you say, adoption of IMTA by the aquaculture industry is quite low, quite slow, so you reach a conclusion IMTA doesn't work, No, not really. I don't think you have understood that, as a matter of fact, we are working for seeking sustainability in the long term. It will take time. We should not rush. It will take time to put in place. So, at recent conferences, people talk a lot about the blue growth, the blue economy, the blue revolutions. However, we should also recognize that it needs to become greener. So consequently, I think it's about time we combine the two and we talk about turquoise growth, turquoise economy, and turquoise revolution, because as a matter of fact, in how many places is the seawater really blue? A lot of time it's a kind of turquoise color. Only a few places are really blue water. So on that, muito obrigado, and thank you very much.